and there was a big dissent. And I don't know, but I can feel that there are tremendous discrepancies here or conflicting point of view.
Yes, and the best part about this is that again, also those people were not part of the movement when these methods came into working. So they're complaining about something that has been already operating before they joined the movement, so they really have little to say about it. And again, Brujo, don't take me in the wrong way, but it's usually 2.5 to 3 years in the movement. I've been considering every personal opinion of everyone, and I can only say that this has delayed our work so much. It has delayed the essence of the movement so much, and everybody really contributing to the movement is really done with it. So if anybody has a problem with it, go away, make your own movement, and that's it. I'm not even willing anymore to discuss it, not because I want to be unreasonable, or that I am unreasonable. It's just a waste of fucking time. Everybody has their own opinion. Great. I understand and respect that, but it gets to the point that everybody forgets why we're here, trying to accomplish a resource-based economy or a resource-based economic model, and we don't even get to doing anything productive towards that direction because people always have to bitch about something. So we're going to draw a zero-tolerance policy. You can be in here or you can be part of this community online, which is just 1% of our entire community, and contribute. And if you have too much to complain, then go fuck off and do your own thing. That's the new policy. Welcome.
Closure of its Zeitgeist Movement Chapter. Colombia, a case study, by Carl McGregor, TZM Australia, GCA representative for Asia Pacific. Introduction. This document aims to deal with the potential closure of a chapter by fully addressing all complaints listed, ensuring consistency in the treatment of all chapters, and ensuring consistency with protocol. The case study referred to is of the Colombian chapter, a chapter that has recently been slated for closure by some, but by no means all members of the global chapter's administration. Problems listed with the Colombian chapter, the case in point, are detailed in the document. Colombia Chapter Review, by Nelson Alvarez, dated Monday 5th November 2012, as pertaining to the following. 1. Chapter website 2. Chapter coordination 3. Visible chapter activity 4. Issues with chapter members 5. Criticism from chapter members. These issues will be addressed in this document in a systematic process, and conclusions will be drawn at the end of each section that are in accordance with the protocols and procedures established by the Global Chapters Administration, hereafter referred to as GCA, in 2011. Please note that it is not the aim of this document to call for the closure of any other chapter. Any comparisons present are made with the intention of highlighting inconsistencies in treatment or application of protocol. In the unfortunate case of any information being incorrectly represented in this document, please do not hesitate to contact me with an amendment. A great deal of research has been conducted in order to produce this document, and any errors are due to my unassisted attempts to collate a great deal of information that is unavailable from GCA resources in a very restricted time frame. 1. Chapter website. According to the Colombia Chapter Review, the following problems have been encountered on the Colombia Chapter website. A. There are no links to the global site mission statement, TZM structure, fact, basic information on how/what to do to create a chapter, a contact form, or a visible contact email available on the site. At present, there is no GCA protocol in existence that outlines how websites should be constructed. However, there is a procedure followed by the GCA in assisting chapters with their establishment and development that is consistent across all chapters. For the sake of consistency across the movement, it is agreed that all chapter websites should contain %U2022 a link to the global site %U2022 and about section featuring the most up-to-date version of the TZM mission statement, the most up-to-date version of the TZM structure, the most up-to-date version of the TZM FAQ. For the sake of facilitating engagement with the chapter for any newcomer to the movement, it is agreed that all chapters should make the following easily visible and accessible via their website. %U2022 a contact form or a mail contact. %U2022 basic information regarding how to become involved. This may include how to join a chapter and how to establish a chapter, or how to engage with projects/teams. The following subsections detail how the issues reported on in the Colombia chapter review with the Colombian website are far from exclusive to Colombia, being issues that appear in many official chapter websites. Missing links to the global site. Regarding links to the global site, this is something that can be easily rectified, yet is also lacking in a number of other chapters. Other chapters without links to the global site include %U2022 Europe UK Switzerland Sweden Spain Russia Poland Norway Ireland Denmark Czech Republic. Also links to Zeitgeist, the movie, %U2022 Africa South Africa %U2022 North America Canada. Old link, so not working. %U2022 Latin America Venezuela Peru Guatemala Ecuador Chile Argentina Costa Rica Uruguay. Incorrect link, many incorrect / out of date links. %U2022 Asia Pacific Singapore India. The global site also has a link to TZM Paraguay, which appears to no longer be active. The domain has apparently been sold to a commercial organization, which displays links to various commercial sites. Missing mission statement. Regarding the mission statement, there are a number of other chapters that either do not include any sort of mission statement or do not include an up-to-date official version. These chapters include Europe, Belgium Bulgaria Poland Finland Switzerland Macedonia Serbia Slovakia Africa South Africa Latin America Peru. Missing structure guide. Regarding the official structure, there are a number of other chapters that do not include any sort of structure guide, and certainly not the official guide. These chapters include %U2022 Europe, Belgium Bulgaria Denmark Finland Germany Macedonia Switzerland Slovakia Serbia. %U2022 Africa, South Africa. %U2022 Latin America, Peru. Missing fact / inappropriate fact. Regarding the fact, there are many chapters that either do not have in fact at all, or which use in fact that is specific to the Venus project as answered by Jake Fresco, and not one that is specific to the Zeitgeist movement. These chapters are as follows. Switzerland Croatia Slovakia Poland incomplete. Czech Republic coming soon. Germany, only one queue in German. Slovenia, only in English. Portugal, loaded with TVP content. Serbia, exclusively TVP. Belgium, exclusively TVP. Bulgaria, exclusively TVP. Lithuania, exclusively TVPO Macedonia, exclusively TVPO Denmark, exclusively TVPO Russia, exclusively TVPO Greece, exclusively TVP %U2022 Africa, South Africa %U2022 Latin America, Peru Uruguay. Missing information on how to start a chapter. Regarding the chapter section, there are many other chapters that fail to include a section on how to start a chapter. Many sites do not have any section for subchapters at all. However, many of these chapters have links to groups / teams / projects. Arguably, these are acceptable as a substitute for chapters, in the case of national chapters that have agreed, by consensus, to concentrate on a variety of projects, rather than local PR-oriented chapters, many of which are active, although some chapters appear to be completely stagnant. Chapter sites without clear information on how to start a chapter are as follows. Europe Belgium Slovenia Slovakia Bulgaria Czech Republic Denmark Poland Germany Finland Switzerland Lithuania Serbia Italy UK Macedonia Africa South Africa Latin America Mexico O Peru O Ecuador percent U2022, Asia Pacific O Israel O New Zealand O Malaysia. It is agreed that all chapters are to be formally and individually advised of any necessary changes that are to be made to their websites by the GCA representative responsible for their region, and for a reasonable waiting period to be applied for the task to be complete. It is necessary to observe universal application of any requests and compliance, and for this to be supported by a protocol that is made available to all chapters. B logo doesn't show the word Colombia on it. This is the case for most chapters, as most chapters are using the TZM official logo. It is therefore not adequate as a reason to call for the closure of any chapter, unless it is clearly stipulated that all chapters must include a logo on their website with their country's name on it. If all chapters are to make this change, then a notification must be officially delivered, and a reasonable waiting period must apply. See presentation. Percent U2022. The Zeitgeist movement exists fundamentally as the TVP's activist arm. Percent U2022 TVP materials and experimental City D, Venus project points C and D will be tackled together, as they are essentially the same point, i.e., heavy or inappropriate focus on the Venus project. In this case, there are several chapters that overtly focus heavily on the Venus project or do so in an inappropriate manner. Most sites link to TVP in some way, or have some TVP content. However, I mention here mainly the chapter sites whose content is potentially misleading. These chapters include Percent U2022 Europe, O Belgium, main page appeals too much to TVP/Jake Fresco as a source of information/learning, where there is alternative TZM content available but not used. O Bulgaria, main page appeals too much to TVP/Jake Fresco as a source of information/learning. Under Join the Movement is a section that says Support Project Venus. There is nothing about joining TZMO Croatia. The About Us section has a subsection called Change that is exclusively about TVP, where there is alternative TZM content available but not used. O Lithuania, a whole section from the main menu is dedicated to TVP. O Slovakia, heavy TVP focus throughout, where there is alternative TZM content available but not used. Percent U2022 North America. O Canada, a minor point, perhaps, but the mission statement lists the goal as to spread the message of TVP. Percent U2022 Latin America. O Peru, site has a donation section in the main menu, leading to the purchase of a TVP t-shirt. No other merchandise is listed. Regarding presentation in a more general sense, the Norwegian chapter site appears to be a wiki, and not a conventional website. For this reason, it appears that many of the features expected of a website are not present or are difficult to identify. A wiki seems like a very positive addition to any TZM chapter website, but standing alone as the face of any given chapter, it is arguably not appropriate as a site for newcomers to the movement to become involved. It is agreed that the main focus of a TZM chapter website should be TZM, without the reliance on material of any other organization, TVP included, where there is material available via TZM that is adequate in providing an explanation. With ample material available, it is expected that, if given an adequate time period in which to apply changes, any chapter requested to update the educational content of their website should be able to do so. Any chapter that is resistant to the use of TZM, rather than TVP materials, for educational purposes, needs to critically examine their reason for such resistance. Team Focus Percent U2022, Zeitgeist Agriculture Percent U2022, Zeitgeist Nutrition Percent U2022, Zeitgeist Medicine Percent U2022, Zeitgeist Architecture. It is clear that only a selection of the project groups within the Colombian chapter are listed here. This is in no way an accurate representation of the chapter's focus, but is instead a selection of 4 from a much larger number of active project groups in the chapter. These groups are not listed at the forefront of the chapter's activity, but are accessible via transparent and horizontally structured open atrium platform. Many other chapters have links on their main site to project teams and groups, many of which are of a similar type. It is clear that TZM Colombia are fulfilling their main objectives as a chapter and are also engaging in a variety of other projects that make the chapter more holistic in focus. With regard to a focus that is not strictly in line with the aims and ethos of TZM, there are other chapters whose websites contain information that could be considered not entirely in line with, but not contrary to the movement, e.g. no chapter condones violence or solicits open donations. As an example, the Czech Republic chapter has a section for articles, with subsections devoted to cooking, health and lifestyle. These are not simply on a Facebook page or open atrium site, but are clearly displayed on the main page. It is agreed that a more holistic focus within any given chapter may reflect the microculture within that region or chapter, and is to be considered a natural facet of an emergent movement. Unless any chapter promotes values or projects that are either directly contrary to the aims and ethos of the movement or are a clear attempt at hijacking the agenda, then the chapter is not to be criticized or harassed for their inclusion of a broad demographic of interests. 2. Chapter coordination. According to the Colombia Chapter Review, the following problems have been encountered with regard to the Colombia Chapter coordination. %U2022 Nobody assumed the coordination once Gabriel Viva's former national coordinator left the country to France. %U2022 members, as Eric and Oscar state, everyone is a coordinator in Colombia, we don't have leaders, and we don't want them either. It is unusual for a chapter to not have coordinators. However, this does not mean that it is unacceptable. The coordination protocol clearly stipulates that it is necessary to have a clear point of contact established in every chapter. If there is a clear point of contact in a chapter for GCA representatives and visitors to the website, then this is deemed sufficient for the sake of effective and efficient communication. This point of contact does not have to remain the same indefinitely, nor be restricted to a single individual. If the responsibility for fielding such communication is passed from one individual to another, or is the shared responsibility of a group of volunteers, then this is acceptable as a means of achieving the aim. In this emergent movement, which describes itself as horizontal and holographic, it is to be expected that chapters will experiment with a variety of governance structures, with the aim of achieving the most horizontal and holographic structure possible for their individual stage of development. The imposition of a rule stipulating that there must be a hierarchical structure with one named coordinator is a notion born of an outdated social structure favoring hierarchy, one that the movement claims to be moving away from. 3. Visible chapter activity. According to the Colombia Chapter Review, the following problems have been encountered with regard to Colombian chapter activity. %U2022. There is no report from the chapter since 201. 1% U2022. There are no activities found in media. They use very well their Zeitgeist Cafe to talk and / or organize activities in Facebook or open atrium such as this experimental farm. http://www.zeitgeistcolombia.com/equipos/agricultura/node/645. Although there is a formal chapter report protocol, it is true that many chapters do not provide the monthly reports that they are required to do. With the majority of chapters failing to comply with this requirement, it is clear that another method of communication between chapters is needed if the arbitrary dissolution of the majority of chapters due to non-compliance is to be avoided. Many chapters provide reports of their activity at international chapter meetings, although there is often a long waiting period between meetings and insufficient time at meetings for each chapter to be properly represented, in addition to the fact that many chapters are unable to be represented at such meetings due to time zone issues. It is arguably the case that formal reporting is not a necessity for any chapter. It is arguably the case that the role of the GCA is to assist chapters in their development and aid them in dealing with any issues they face. With this being the role of the GCA, it is arguably sensible for the GCA to consult with the chapters they are responsible for assisting in ways that suit the functionality and development level of the group. Access to a transparent open Atrium platform, as is already the case with the Colombian chapter, or a Trello board, or even a Google group, is arguably ample as a substitute for formal reporting, as all information is clearly available without the need for duplication and bureaucratic form filling. 4. Issues with chapter members. According to the Colombia chapter review, the following problems have been encountered with regard to particular volunteers of the Colombian chapter. All complaints have been reported, recorded, and investigated by the people to whom they pertain, and not by any impartial third party. In the case of complaints, it is best practice for mediation and investigation to be made by an impartial third party, and not the individual who has made the complaint. The complaints protocol stipulates that complaints regarding a chapter or national coordinator are to be investigated and dealt with by the GCA. In the case of the Colombian chapter 1, as a Spanish-speaking GCA representative offered on multiple occasions to mediate between the Colombian chapter and the complainants as the GCA representative closest to the chapter is one of the complainants, thus leading to a conflict of interests regarding solution of the case. However, my offers have never been taken seriously, with proposed invitations to mediate at meetings never upheld, and the intentional blocking of my attempts at mediation at the most recent meeting of Monday 5th November 2012. Complaints made against the Colombian chapter are as follows. %U2022 formal complaints, received with documents and recordings, in GCAO, Andres Delgado to chapters at TZM March 4, 2012 verbal violence, from Eric O. Jorge Foro GCA issue form March 14, 2012 verbal violence, from Eric, %U2022 informal complaints. O. Nelson Alvarez ad hominem attack October 1, 2011, received by Eric in a TS3, 2 hours or more of conversation, shared with more than 20 members. Hearing Nelson, you are a liar. Colombia has deleted the recording, but there are witness members, aware of that recording, like Gabriel Vivas, who heard the full informal meeting. Next day, October 2. There is an email of that indirect disrespect to all Latin coordinators and members from Eric, saying let's all go tomorrow to the Latin American meeting. There are only stubborn people there. Eric recorded. These complaints are statements of actions that have taken place, but no evidence is presented at this stage. The phrase verbal violence needs to be clearly defined in order for any complaint to be dealt with as such, and complaints that being referred to as a liar constitute an ad hominem attack are only valid if the attack was against the character of the individual and not their argument, a case that can only be examined given the context of the comment. In order for any complaint to be properly investigated, evidence must be provided to an impartial third party, who is to conduct the investigation. It is the case here that the motion to close the Colombian chapter has been put forward by those responsible for making the aforementioned complaints, all of which pertain to a single individual within the Colombian chapter, and not to the chapter itself. If a chapter is to be dissolved on the basis of one or more complaints made, then it is agreed that those complaints must pertain to the functioning of that chapter, and not simply to the conduct of an individual volunteer toward any other. Complaints pertaining to the conduct of an individual volunteer may result in actions being taken with regard to that volunteer, but not the punishment of their entire chapter. It is also arguably the case that the informal complaints recorded in this case, despite being potentially offensive to some volunteers, are not sufficiently serious as to warrant the threatened closure of a chapter. 5. Criticism from chapter members. According to the Colombia chapter review, the following problems have been encountered with regard to criticism emerging from volunteers in the Colombian chapter. What is referred to here as criticism is a series of comments made by individual volunteers with the Colombian chapter, and are not necessarily taken to be the consensus of the chapter. U2022 we have entered the second stage of projects, even when the global movement has, Eric recorded, the protocols were an imposition from a few on the top. Eric recorded, the movement is horizontal, and the global moderators don't act as such. Eric recorded, the chapter guide is just a guide, you don't need to follow it. Eric, a mail to all Hispanic Speak Google Group. The One Planet project is just to collect emails and promote Peter's films and not our films. Eric recorded, a conspirative perspective showing repetitive complaints against the US government and corporations. Complaints of why the global movement doesn't react against them are constantly heard in Colombian meeting recordings, or for example this Facebook post on July 1, 2012. I agree that technology should be used to our advantage, but according to the current model of government investments, will the largest sums be invested in technology for better living? Is the global ZM winning their fight in the prioritization of technology towards the construction of an EBR? Should not TZM Global, with 500,000 members, and its mented critical mass, be questioning the WWF or other to avoid this kind of things, instead of being in an eternal fight regarding organizational issues? What technology is being used for today? Oscar in several Latino Facebook about new USA technology weapons. Picture saved. It is arguably the case that such perspectives are not restricted only to volunteers, with the Colombian chapter, of whom only 2 are mentioned in this complaint. Such complaints based on comments made by individual volunteers represent an attempt to criminalize certain actions or viewpoints within the movement rather than openly accepting the variety of views that we may all hold. It is an invalid criticism leveled against an entire chapter to hold that the chapter should be dissolved due to the views of a single volunteer, that any given project is unappealing to them, or that the movement is inadequately following through on its ethos of horizontality. Complaints of this nature are not featured in the chapter protocol as sufficient reason to dissolve a chapter, and any attempt to dissolve a chapter on the basis of such complaints is a clear breach of protocol. The use of a single Facebook post from a single individual to make a formal complaint against a chapter with the intent to dissolve that chapter is an absurd level of pettiness to stoop to. It is hoped that no such flimsy attempts are to be made in future, as they absolutely fail to stand up to examination and are not worth the time spent investigating them. Conclusion: to conclude this report, it is pertinent to refer to the ending notes of Nelson Alvarez, author of the Colombia chapter review document. Ending notes. After the last coordinator Gabriel left Colombia, he was under pressure by other chapter members, but at that time a year ago, he asked Gilbert and I to not interfere with that issue. I consider that was a mistake from Gilbert and I. There was excellent communication with the chapter before that, and right after Gabriel left everything became confusing, because nobody oriented the movement, and then a lot of different opinions, projects and horizontality interpretations started to show up. So even that the chapter is very active, most of the activities are oriented not in spreading the information but including people, by using different non-TZM related kinds of projects. Using these last words, the chapter does not exist anymore as an official chapter, and we need to wait for some volunteer who is willing to use the regular process. Until then, I suggest to use the third-party chapter concept if it's possible to keep them near. There's nothing else to do with them, they can do whatever they want, and, like I said to Eric months ago in a 3-hour Skype conversation, they can be an example in the future of best organization. Until now, every time a chapter starts up, it's necessary to have a person or group of persons as voices to contact. So I repeat, the chapter of Colombia is big enough to be cut off by an official mechanism. They shouldn't be compared with a cancer. It is more like a flu, at least in this part of the world, because the rest of the chapters are getting prepared for this. The former coordination did great things in the country, and nearly 4,000 can be contacted by our main mailing list at thezeitgeistmovement.com. Therefore, I recommend to take that channel as our communication tool in order to gain a new momentum and recover the focus in the Colombian chapter so it can regain its official status. We can't leave this, people. http://www.youtube.com/WATCHV=MO7XGBARLE for Nelson Alvarez in stating the chapter does not exist anymore. This seems a little preemptive, as there has been no consideration on the part of the GCA following this report. In fact, this report has not been presented to the GCA at all, but provided to me by an unnamed volunteer, who I have never met, who was present at the meeting, at which a vote was held regarding the dissolution of the Colombian chapter. Documentary evidence of the vote held at this meeting is available by clicking here. According to the chapter protocol, a chapter can be dissolved either due to it no longer being active, or by the GCA. The assumption, being the whole GCA, is inferred in this document, as it is not stipulated that it is up to any particular member of the GCA acting in accordance with the chapter protocol, which stipulates that there are two conditions under which a chapter may be terminated. 1. Cessation of activity within the chapter that is observable for an extended period of time. 2. Promotion of an agenda/direction that is contrary to the aims and ethos of the movement. In the chapter protocol, it is not stipulated that a chapter may be dissolved due to any of the reasons outlined in the Colombia chapter review document, nor that a chapter may be dissolved by a vote from volunteers outside that chapter, who are neither directly affected by the chapter, nor are GCA representatives. Voting is a decision-making method that is explicitly not endorsed by the movement, as per the decision-making protocol. And the inclusion of certain volunteers of chapters, other than the Colombian chapter, and outside the GCA, in this vote is a matter that remains this far unexplained by those responsible for the course of action taken. In fact, this vote and its implications are yet to be formally announced to the GCA, the body explicitly responsible for the decision in question. In this case, I see fit to complain that a gross misconduct has been carried out in the case of the Colombian chapter, whereby a decision has been made in direct conflict with the chapter protocol, the coordination protocol, and the decision-making protocol, and that it has led to a negative impact on the well-being of volunteers working for a well-established and highly functional chapter. As per the complaints protocol, this report serves as a formal complaint submission to the GCA against those responsible for the gross misconduct, to be investigated and rectified as per the appropriate protocols. The reference to the Colombian chapter as being like a flu rather than a cancer bears the connotation of the practices of the Colombian chapter being something to be feared for the possibility of contagion among other chapters. It remains to be considered why the chapter is referred to in this way, as a chapter in an emergent movement that has done nothing against protocol, or nothing that many other chapters have done, should be appreciated for its collective efforts, and not treated like a disease, to be excised for fear of contamination of other chapters with its emergent values. In closing, I find that in the case of the Colombian chapter, there is no compelling reason for the chapter to be closed. There are matters pertaining to the chapter website that can be improved, given time, but it is necessary to concede that these are matters that pertain to many other chapter websites, and that there is no convincing reason to single out the Colombian chapter for dissolution. In the case of the Colombian chapter, it is clear that the GCA has not followed protocol, and has mounted a case for closure against a chapter that we should instead be assisting with development. I hope that this case provides a positive learning experience for all concerned, and that we can all proceed with a greater degree of clarity and integrity regarding what is expected of a chapter, the GCA, and our experience of advancing a new paradigm for a sustainable Earth.